Fate dealt me a wild hand. Reborn into this new world, I awakened inside a dragon's egg. But this wasn't just any ordinary shell. It was a legendary double yolk destined to bring forth twins. I was convinced that the moment I broke through that shell, I was meant to rule over all creation. But reality is incredibly cruel. My own flesh and blood banished me from our clan, and tossed me into the most brutal monster labyrinth on Earth, leaving me to die alone. The ancient dragon tribe follows a ruthless law. Only a single heir from every clutch is permitted to survive. Whenever twins are born, the weaker hatchling becomes a sacrifice. And since my innate abilities completely paled in comparison to my sibling, I was branded a failure and thrown out like trash. Now, this underground maze is swarming with high-level beasts. Worse yet, the supreme ancient blood flowing through my veins turns me into the ultimate delicacy for these predators. My so-called parents never lost a wink of sleep, worrying about my return. And honestly, fate seemed to be dancing right in the palm of their hands. Trapped at level 1, merely breathing felt like an impossible miracle. Thanks to my incredibly tiny and fragile body, I somehow managed to slip beneath the radar of those terrifying monsters. However, the agonizing hunger in my belly was slowly dragging my soul straight into the abyss. Right as I was stumbling through the dark, in absolute panic, hopelessly begging the heavens for a single scrap of food, a bizarrely faint, sour aroma suddenly drifted through the shadowy tunnels. It was pungent, bordering on rotten. Yet, my primal instincts roared to life, telling me it was a feast. This was a scent only a true dragon could track. I threw caution to the wind. Sprinting blindly through the twisting cavern networks, I finally tracked that lifeline to a massive, dome-shaped underground chamber. And resting right in the heart of it all was a colossal behemoth over 20 meters long. A level 28 variant Earth dragon. A single breath from this titan would obliterate my existence in an instant. Trembling, I traced the aroma and spotted the prize. 3 or 4 newly born Earth dragon whelps, roughly my size, desperately drinking from their mother. Now, Earth dragons might not be true ancient rulers, but they still carry a fraction of our legendary draconic power. But far more importantly, the rich milk of this variant monster was the perfect elixir for a starving candle dragon like myself. Melting completely into the shadows, I slowly crawled my way underneath the sleeping giant's massive belly. When I finally got a closer look at those 4 nursing babies, tears of pure joy threatened to spill from my eyes. The heavens hadn't forsaken me. These freshly hatched infants were still completely blind, meaning there was zero chance they'd notice an imposter stealing their meals. I carefully peeked up to make absolutely sure the towering mother beast was blissfully unaware. Giving in entirely to my primal starvation, I locked onto the source and furiously chugged down massive, desperate gulps. Up above, the giant mother dragon suddenly twitched in confusion, thinking to herself, which of my little ones is drinking with such explosive force? But maternal instinct whispered that a ravenous baby was a healthy baby. Her heart was far too gentle to scold the greedy child, so she simply ignored it and drifted back to sleep. As that sweet, warm liquid cascaded down my throat and filled my stomach, my violently shivering frame was embraced by an unbelievable, soothing heat, and right along with it, I could feel a miraculous, steady increase in my power level. Perhaps it was the sheer exhaustion of outrunning the Reaper, or maybe the maternal warmth radiating from this giant beast was just too intoxicating. But the exact second my survival instincts finally powered down, my tiny head slammed forward, plunging into a deep, dreamless slumber. I have absolutely no clue how much. Time vanished in the dark, before a sudden, piercing grip on the back of my neck violently ripped me back to reality. And then, a gigantic, terrifying reptilian eye eclipsed my entire field of vision, trapped inside the terrifying gaze of Dodray. Those monstrous pupils, burning with an overwhelming, apocalyptic rage. My only option was to desperately pray that her jaws would crush me in one swift bite. Trembling like a leaf, I tucked in my tiny claws, squeezed my eyes tightly shut, and completely surrendered to the Reaper's scythe. But the fatal strike never fell. The beast's terrifying glare suddenly morphed into something incredibly complex and unreadable. That blazing, murderous fury slowly melted away into a look of profound pity, followed by a heavy wave of undeniable motherly resignation. At long last, after a heart-stopping silence, she quietly closed her massive eyes, released a massive sigh, and delicately placed me right back down. Among her own hatchlings, I stood there, absolutely paralyzed with shock. The massive earth dragon had already lost interest. She settled back into the dirt, her heavy snores echoing through the cavern. Meanwhile, the newly hatched dragonlings swarmed me with boundless energy. They nudged and sniffed at me, acting exactly like a litter of overexcited puppies, greeting a brand new brother. But then I heard it. No way! Is Mother seriously adopting this hideous creature? It looks utterly bizarre, like some kind of mutant lizard trash. I leaned in, narrowing my eyes, and quickly realized every single telepathic jab was a direct insult aimed at my pride. Furious, I opened my jaws and unleashed a surprisingly vicious roar. Instantly, all four hatchlings froze like statues. It was blatantly obvious. They never expected the ugly runt to talk back. Honestly, I hadn't expected it either. But after leveling up and unlocking the telepathic communication skill, my world changed completely. Not only could I decode the monstrous language, but these beasts could hear my voice, too. And just like that, I spent 3 surprisingly peaceful days, hidden within that rocky sanctuary. Cohabitating with the dragonlings actually turned out to be incredibly wholesome. Sure, they possessed the foulest mouths imaginable, but their bark was far worse than their bite. They never laid a single claw on me in malice. They threw endless streams of mockery my way, putting on this arrogant front about my shameless freeloading. But the truth was entirely different. Because I was the smallest, the weakest, and arguably the most hideous of the entire clutch, whenever night fell, all 4 of those tsundere lizards would curl their bodies completely around mine. And whenever the slightest rustle echoed from outside the cavern, their protective instincts flared. They would tighten their defensive ring around me, growling out harsh words like, "Step back, you pathetic little runt," or "Keep your mouth shut and don't drag us down." But their actions painted a beautifully different picture. They were risking their own lives to protect the outsider. I had already secretly analyzed their status screens, and honestly, their combat power was laughably lower than mine, though I kept that little secret hidden. As a rare, superior tier existence, my experience bar filled up at a terrifying pace compared to theirs. In just those short days, I had skyrocketed all the way to level 9. Meanwhile, the 4 royal hatchlings were still stuck at a measly level 4. By the 3rd dawn, I had genuinely started viewing this earth dragon clutch as my true, fated family. They were 1,000,000 times more precious to me than my own wretched human bloodline. My one lingering regret in this sanctuary was that I had yet to share a single word with the towering matriarch. Even on the occasions when I attempted to offer my respects, she would grant me a fleeting, stoic glare and withhold any telepathic response. I foolishly believed this slice of paradise would stretch on forever, but destiny is relentlessly cruel. The very next morning, an apocalyptic nightmare invaded our home. A level 35 mutated Kodo beast completely obliterated our peace as it violently breached the cavern entrance. Its four terrifying, blood-red eyes instantly locked onto my four adoptive siblings. Saliva dripped from its monstrous jaws. It was driven totally insane by starvation. The matriarch reacted, faster than lightning. With a colossal sweep of her spiked tail, she hurled us all into the deepest corner of the den before turning herself into an impenetrable wall against the invading monstrosity. The heavy tension was suffocating. The two apex predators clashed, and within a split second, the sanctuary became a war zone. However, facing an anomaly with such an overwhelmingly superior level advantage, the mighty mother was ruthlessly beaten back, inch by bloody inch. In a desperate, heartbreaking sacrifice too, physically blocked the path to her beloved children. The invader's massive, bone-crushing horn drove straight and true, obliterating her chest cavity. Yet, defying death itself, the matriarch dug her razor-sharp hind claws deep into the bedrock. With her vital organs pierced clean through, she outright refused to let that bastard step even a single millimeter closer to us. Her massive forelimbs slammed around the invader's throat, locking onto its flesh like unyielding chains of iron. Then, unleashing a soul-shattering roar of maternal fury, she unhinged her terrifying jaws and buried her fangs deep into the enemy's spinal column, viciously ripping away a massive chunk of bloody meat. The subterranean battlefield violently trembled and began to splinter apart. The sheer kinetic force of two titans relentlessly attempting to slaughter each other caused the ceiling to fail, sending an endless cascade of lethal boulders raining down upon us. I launched myself skyward, furiously shattering the fallen debris with rapid fire strikes. But the structural integrity was failing way too fast, and shielding my four defenseless siblings was draining every last ounce of my stamina. Because of my weakness, there was absolutely nothing I could do to assist the dying matriarch. And the cruelest truth? Even if I had thrown my life away, done much against a thick-headed monstrosity like the Kodo, I would have only been dead weight in that clash of titans. Suddenly, the Kodo beast surged forward with a frenzied burst of savage power. The massive horn buried deep inside the earth. Dragon's chest actually cracked under the sheer, devastating brutality of the impact. The violent tearing of her flesh brought unimaginable agony. The Earth Dragon Mother knew her fate was sealed. She would not survive this bloody battle. She turned her gaze toward her den one last time, and when she saw me, fighting desperately to shield her newborn cubs, a profound warmth flickered in her eyes. It was as if to say it was the right call, sparing your life. Then, her bloodshot eyes snapped, wide open with absolute resolve. She channeled every last ounce of her fading life force and slammed her head into the Kodo beast, striking it square in the back of the skull. The impact was downright earth-shattering. Her own skull caved in upon contact, and her jaw shattered into 1,000 pieces. But even the thick-hided Kodo beast could not withstand such a devastating, suicidal strike to the back of its head. Its skull completely caved in with a sickening, bone-crushing crack. Both massive beasts let out deafening, agonized roars before crashing heavily to the ground. As the brutal clash finally ended, the collapsing cave settled into an eerie stillness. I tore myself free from the rubble and rushed to the earth. Dragon sighed, but the devastating state of her crushed skull told me everything I needed to know. She was already slipping away. My children are my precious children, all right? It was the very first time I had ever heard the Earth Dragon Mother speak. Her life force was barely a dying ember now, and her shattered jaw made every single syllable an agonizing struggle. Faced with her desperate question, I fought to suppress the suffocating guilt that was violently clawing at my chest, because all four of her precious cubs were dead. Every single one of them had been brutally crushed by the falling boulders. The avalanche of stone was simply too overwhelming, and no matter how fiercely I had fought to protect them, I just could not stop it all. The Earth Dragon's ultimate, suicidal strike had triggered a massive cave-in, and while I had barely put it out of that hellish collapse alive, the four innocent cubs had not. The peaceful days we had shared together still played so vividly in my mind, and I had already come to cherish them as my very own brothers and sisters. Just minutes ago, they were vibrant and so full of life, but now they were nothing but tragic souls buried deep beneath the merciless rubble. My children, are they safe? The Earth Dragon's eyes had been completely destroyed by the horrific impact. Yet, she spent her absolute final breath begging for an answer. Her trembling voice was filled with nothing but pure, unconditional love. A devastating wave of guilt crashed through my entire being, detonating inside my chest like a magical bomb. I clenched, my teeth so incredibly hard that I thought my jaw might shatter. I desperately choked down my suffocating grief and kept my trembling voice as gentle as humanly possible. They are completely fine. They just passed out from the shock. They are all okay. Is that so? A tender, profoundly relieved smile somehow crossed her ruined face. When I am gone, consume my flesh. Her jarring words stopped me dead in my tracks. We were born within the abyss of this dungeon. It is a cruel curse we are forced to carry from the moment of our birth. Absolutely nothing can go to waste here. This is the final nourishment that I can ever offer to my beloved children. I do not know why a superior tier monster like yourself ended up stranded in this pathetic place, but as repayment for taking you in, I am begging you to look after my precious children. Her violently trembling body finally gave out before she could utter another syllable. And with one last hollow exhale, the fading spark of life left her broken body completely. Yet, even at the absolute bitter end, her bloodied face held the peaceful, radiant happiness of a devoted mother who truly believed her babies were perfectly safe. She passed away in absolute quiet. Warm blood heavily soaked into the cold earth beneath my feet, and the ruined cave descended into a deathly, suffocating silence. My mouth hung wide open in silent agony. I could not even wail in despair, as crying out would only attract a horde of bloodthirsty monsters. But my aching chest felt as though it were literally being crushed under a massive boulder. The majestic subspecies Earth Dragon who had mercifully taken me in. The four innocent cubs I had lived and slept right alongside. All five of them were ripped from this world in a single, merciless instant. The very first time she spoke to me, those words became her last. In that agonizing split second, a wave of absolute, crushing despair swallowed me whole. But this brutal reality offered no time for tears. A deafening shockwave shattered the silence. The mutated Kato beast, a monster that should have been a corpse, violently lurched back to its feet. Its skull was a caved-in mess of gore. Yet, it unleashed a blood-curdling roar of triumph. To this colossal nightmare, the tiny hatchling trembling before, it was nothing more than a pathetic snack. But do you want to know the absolute best part about being cursed to this god-forsaken hellhole? I slowly lowered my head. My tiny claws clenched into deadly fists as I stared down the towering behemoth. My entire body trembled. Not from paralyzing fear, but from a blazing, intoxicating thrill. System notification. New skill, Dragon Aura, successfully unlocked. The absolute best part is, I get to rip you apart with my own two claws. A ferocious battle cry tore from my throat as I launched myself like a bullet at the mutated beast. Its body was utterly mangled, but piercing that armor like hide was an absolute pipe dream for my current level. However, there was a fatal blind spot. The path to absolute victory had already been carved out in blood by the nursing mother, a perfect opening through its impenetrable defense. That gaping wound she had desperately torn open, right at the base of its neck. My aura exploded, propelling me forward like a streak of divine lightning. I aimed straight for the monster's shattered nape, both claws fully extended, plunging mercilessly into the exposed flesh and violently tearing the wound wide open. Memories flooded my mind. Her silent, unwavering protection over the last 3 days, desperately scrambling for scraps alongside my 4 siblings. The warmth of sleeping, curled up together in the cold. These fragile moments flashed before my eyes, like fragments of shattered glass, igniting a monstrous, suffocating killing intent within my soul. My mind was entirely consumed by a single, blazing directive. Slaughter this beast. Avenge my fallen family. 3 or 4 agonizing hours passed. I stood silently before the Earth Dragon Mother's lifeless body. I gently rested my blood-stained claws against her scales, clinging to the fading warmth of her soul. I refused to let sorrow pull me under. This ruthless dungeon holds no sympathy for tears. Her haunting words echoed in my mind. Every monster born in these abyssal depths carries a death sentence from birth. Meeting a grim end at any second is simply the cruel law of this world. My only agonizing regret was my absolute powerlessness to save my 4 siblings. Mother, I swear on my soul, I will survive for you and for all of them. Trembling, I forced my jaws open and bit directly into her flesh. I tore away a piece and forced it down my throat. I violently choked back my anguished sobs, swallowing my bitter tears with every single bite. The taste of the one who protected me was a soul-crushing, agonizing poison. Yet, I forced it down, with every ounce of willpower I possessed. No matter how violently my stomach rebelled, I refused to waste a single drop of her sacrifice. I had no other choice. The stench of blood would summon a horde of predators, and her remains would be defiled by worthless scavengers anyway. Exactly 3 days later, I emerged from the shadows of the cave. Though my level sat at a mere 18, the terrifying growth modifiers of a superior tier bloodline allowed me to effortlessly decimate lower tier monsters at level 30. I flexed my talons with a bone-chilling snap. My lips curled upward into a vicious, bloodthirsty smirk as I locked my gaze onto the endless, treacherous labyrinth ahead. 3 mana signatures detected nearby. Absolutely perfect timing. My stomach is growling for a slaughter. And just like that, I took my first legendary step toward conquering this abyss. 5 bloody days had passed since I left that sanctuary. Every single minotaur in the surrounding sector had been utterly eradicated by my claws. As the final beast crumbled to dust, my level finally hit 20. Ding! System alert. Maximum level cap reached. Experience absorption suspended. Please select a legendary evolution path to shatter your mortal limits. Path 1. Ascending Candle Dragon. The Orthodox Evolution Route Foray. Option 1. The Young Candle Dragon. This path promises a massive boost to mana capacity. Option 2. The Minor Candle Dragon. A highly balanced evolutionary path. It guarantees razor-sharp senses and lightning-fast reflexes. And then, there was the Degraded Candle Dragon, a completely unorthodox path of evolution. The system stated it could only be unlocked after enduring extreme conditions for an extended period. It offered overwhelming vitality and agility, But the catch? It severely limited my mana capacity and physical growth potential. Staring at the glowing holographic window, the system's pattern finally clicked. Every 20 levels marked a new tier of power. To ascend any higher, evolution was an absolute must. But just as I was carefully weighing my options, a suffocating bloodlust slammed into my back like a tidal wave. Every single survival instinct in my body screamed in sheer terror. I whipped my head around. Somehow, without me even noticing, a pack of at least 20 mutated Kato beasts had completely surrounded me. And, lurking in the shadows behind them, a colossal figure stepped forward. Its massive frame was a terrifying shade of blood red. A combat-specialized Kato beast leader. Level 88. Grade, rare. A monster bordering on the mid-tier realm. Reading those stats sent an icy shiver straight down my spine. The setup was crystal clear now. This beast leader had deliberately baited me into a dead-end trap. But what baffled me was the motive. I had zero history with this monster pack. There was no blood feud between us. So why the hell was this alpha suddenly hunting me down? And then, the horrifying realization hit me. I quickly activated my telepathy skill, bracing myself for a tense negotiation. But the beast leader let out a chilling snort of contempt before I could even speak. I did not expect the rat stealing food from our territory to be such a pathetic, tiny runt. Well, that confirmed my absolute worst fears. Minotaurs were the primary prey for these Kato beasts, and back in my early days in the dungeon, desperate to sharpen my combat skills, and constantly pushed by the ravenous hunger of my gluttony skill, skyrocketing through the roof, I had been slaughtering minotaurs non-stop for days on end. My hunting spree had caused massive plunge in their population across the entire sector, which meant I had directly starved the Kato beasts, leaving them dangerously desperate for food. Even as my brain processed this massive mistake, I maintained a calm facade and shrugged. Show even an ounce of fear, and you become prey. That is the absolute rule of the wild. And that truth is undeniable law in the depths of this dungeon. I firmly planted my feet and tilted my head with pure arrogance. Yeah, that was my doing. But your kind slaughtered the one who raised me, did they not? So, you want to settle this? I am right here. As the words left my mouth, a brilliant blue and green aura erupted across my entire body. I dropped into a combat stance, looking perfectly ready to slaughter their entire pack. Internally, however, my brain was working in overdrive, calculating the absolute fastest escape route. The Kato beast leader was completely caught off guard. It never expected a runt smaller than its front teeth to show such absolute disrespect. With an earth-shattering roar, it lunged forward and activated its movement skill. Ground shrink. The colossal monster seemingly vanished into thin air, instantly reappearing right in front of my face like a phantom teleportation. In that exact split second, the dozens of beasts surrounding me unleashed a synchronized, deafening howl. Immediately, I felt all sensation violently ripped away from my four limbs. Total paralysis. I could not move a single inch. A single strike from a monster this far above my level, and I would be instantly pulverized. In that terrifying microsecond, 1,000 desperate survival plans flashed through my mind, and every single one ended in my gruesome death. There was no strategy. There was zero chance of escape. But then, out of absolute nowhere, a blinding pillar of pure blue energy crashed down from the heavens. It completely swallowed the unsuspecting beast leader whole. The shockwave was so devastating that the underlings closest to the blast did not even have a fraction of a second to scream. They were instantly vaporized into floating ash. As the scorching heat wave slowly dissipated, The rhythmic thud of heavy footsteps echoed through the cavern. It sounded as if a living mountain had suddenly grown legs. Each heavy step sent violent, apocalyptic tremors shaking deep through the earth core. Every single instinct in my soul screamed a final, desperate warning. I am going to die. As the earth-shattering footsteps drew closer, I gathered every ounce of courage from 2 lifetimes and dared to look back. My heart completely stopped. A silhouette as vast and towering as a mountain range consumed my entire vision. But the first thing I saw wasn't its terrifying face. It was the glowing system data from my truth skill. Target: Leviathan, level 355. Superior tier monster. Its pure aura was so overwhelmingly oppressive that my skill couldn't even process anything beyond its name and rank. I instantly held my breath. There was no time to think, no time to question why an absolute dungeon boss was wandering the very first floor. I waited as the catastrophic footsteps faded. Only when dead silence fully returned to the cavern did I dare to exhale. My right leg was completely shattered from the previous blast. With my life on the line, I made a desperate choice. I had to evolve right here, right now. After scanning the shadows to ensure no other beasts were lurking, I summoned the system's evolution panel. The fledgling candle dragon was the most orthodox path, but that form drastically increases body size. In these claustrophobic dungeon tunnels, that massive bulk would only become a deadly disadvantage. Completely out of the question. After intensely analyzing the system descriptions, I locked in my choice. The degraded candle dragon. Sure, in terms of pure stats, it temporarily dilutes the ancient bloodline, but at its very core, it remains a true draconic being, leaving the pathway wide open to awaken as a true candle dragon in the future. Plus, its attributes are flawlessly balanced. Surviving the deadly traps of an ever-shifting labyrinth isn't about maxing out one single attack. It is about ultimate adaptability. With my destiny decided, I closed my eyes. System notification. Evolution protocol engaged. Transformation will complete in 10 seconds. Along with the system's familiar chime, a blazing wave of vitality surged from my core to every single inch of my being. The agonizing pain, the freezing cold, the dizzying blood loss, all of it instantly evaporated. My battered body was supercharged with boiling, draconic blood. My weak, old skin violently peeled away, while new, indestructible scales pierced through the flesh. I barely even had a second to marvel at the intoxicating surge of power before it finished. Ding! Level raised to level 8. My fragile, sky blue scales had mutated into a menacing, deep, dark purple, radiating an impenetrable defense. Every single attribute had skyrocketed. With my awakened dragon vision and heightened sensory perception, I could vividly sense the chaos. That Leviathan's overwhelming aura was causing the entire place monster ecosystem on floor 1 to completely collapse. Every surviving beast was fleeing, in absolute, mindless terror. I still had no clue why an apex dungeon boss had descended to floor 1, but I knew one terrifying truth. This floor was about to become a total slaughterhouse. With that grim realization, I made my move. It was time to plunge to floor 2. Not long after, tragically losing the nursing mother, I had already pinpointed the gateway to the second level. The only reason I had held back was simple. Once you cross the threshold into floor 2, the path back to floor 1 is sealed forever. I still had no idea what nightmare the Leviathan was unleashing up here, but if destiny hadn't forced my hand, I never would have descended this early in my growth. Minutes later, I stood right at the edge of the dark abyss. I took a breath, closed my eyes, and threw myself into the endless void. After a long, stomach-dropping, free fall, I braced myself for a perfect landing. Instead, a shattered piece of human armor made absolutely sure the impact was anything but graceful. But seeing that rusted metal sparked a chilling realization. Was humanity truly the dominant species in this brutal world? I hadn't encountered a single human soul since the moment I was reincarnated. But right as that mystery crossed my mind, an almost imperceptibly faint rustle echoed from 7 or 8 meters behind my back. Assuming it was a bloodthirsty beast launching a sneak attack, I spun around in high alert. But the moment I laid eyes on her, my heart skipped a massive beat. Trembling at the corner of a dead-end passage just ahead of me was a fragile-looking girl. The very first human I had seen since my reincarnation, and honestly, she was absolutely stunning. For a hopeless introvert like me, a guy who had been tragically single for 2 entire lifetimes straight, my imagination immediately went into overdrive. But the second I opened my jaws to greet her, the girl let out a blood-curdling shriek. She collapsed to the dungeon floor, scrambling backward in pure, unadulterated terror. Her legs kicked desperately against the dirt, but she hit a solid stone wall. She was completely trapped. Her sheer panic left me utterly confused. I mean, look at me. My chubby little hatchling body should have been heart-meltingly adorable to any living woman, right? I lowered my belly to the cold ground and crept forward, exactly how you would approach a frightened, stray kitten back on Earth. Hey, I don't mean you any harm at all. I just want to know how you got here. Can you even understand my words? But the girl only looked more petrified. She started chanting desperately under her trembling breath. Fight and maybe survive. Don't fight and definitely die. Master Jinj, I beg of you, please, grant your humble disciple strength. Her prayers made absolutely zero sense to me. Growing anxious about the misunderstanding, I took a step closer to explain myself. But the instant I crossed the 2-meter mark, she exploded into desperate action. She unleashed a full-force roundhouse kick, fueled by every drop of survival instinct she had. I was caught completely off guard. At point-blank range, her ultimate strike landed directly on my head, my supposedly weakest defensive spot. But then, a single system prompt flashed before my eyes. HP -1. I just stared at her, deadpan. Seriously? She is unbelievably weak. I activated my appraisal skill, Truth, and pulled up her system window. Pitiful was a massive understatement. Target identified. Active duty battle monk. Level 19. Species: commoner human female. Reproductive value: above average. With garbage stats like these, she would not even survive a single day on Floor 1. It was a total mystery to me how she had miraculously dragged herself all the way down to Floor 2. The girl slumped to the ground, tightly clutching her right leg. Her face was twisted in absolute agony. Her desperate attack did absolutely nothing to my scales, but the recoil had severely sprained her own ankle. Yet, a heartbeat later, completely ignoring her shattered bones, she bolted away like an absolute madwoman toward a dark tunnel. I lunged forward to chase her down, but a horde of blood-fanged spiders began raining from the ceiling. They blocked my path again and again. Dungeon monsters hunt based on pure life essence. And because that human girl was so incredibly weak, she was completely beneath their notice. Instead, the endless tide of arachnids swarmed directly toward me. Not that they posed any actual threat to my power, but the endless wave of pests made me lose track of her entirely. I was absolutely crushed. My first human encounter was right there, and just like that, she was gone like a ghost. 5 entire days passed, and I slowly carved out my territory here on the treacherous floor 2. Unlike floor 1, the monsters lurking in these depths were violently diverse. Every single day brought a terrifying new species I had never laid eyes on. And tragically, that included humans. Except, every human I stumbled across was just mangled remains or a pile of gnawed bones. The beautiful girl from that encounter still haunted my thoughts, mostly because she was my only living link to humanity. In the past few days alone, I had discovered butchered corpses multiple times in these twisting caves. But I also found a massive trail of footprints, pointing to a huge expedition force of at least 200 to 300 people. Despite the carnage, I desperately needed to track them down. This hellish dungeon ecosystem was clearly not designed for human survival. But if they possessed the power to breach this place, the system logic dictated they also possessed a way out to the surface, an escape route. That glorious possibility was exactly what my soul had been screaming for. But cruel reality hit hard. Days of frantically tracking their trail had yielded absolutely nothing. Only scattered bones, a trail of death, one gruesome scene after another. But then, just as I prepared to exit the cavern, an icy spike of pure killing intent paralyzed my spine. My body moved entirely on survival instinct. I threw myself into a desperate, evasive roll. A hyper-compressed scythe of wind violently sheared past my skull, carving 4 massive trenches straight through the solid rock wall. It tore through the heavy stone as effortlessly as wet tissue paper. There was zero time to process the terror. I instantly ignited the superhuman auditory senses granted by my dragon lineage, immediately locking onto a minuscule biological signature lurking nearby, rocketing toward my blind spot at a terrifying velocity. In the absolute fraction of a second it took to register the threat, the shadow was less than 50 centimeters from my spine. Absolute dread washed over me. Looking back meant certain death. I violently lunged sideways. Demonic talons screechingly grazed the protective armor on my cheek by a fraction of a millimeter. Stumbling out of the death roll, I felt 4 burning lacerations opening across my face. Dodge 2 lethal strikes and you are still drawing breath? It makes sense why you possessed the sheer arrogance to trespass into my domain. It appears you are not entirely useless. An eerie, feminine voice echoed out from the pitch-black abyss. The quadrupedal beast materialized from the absolute darkness. After sinisterly lapping my fresh blood off its razor-sharp claws, it stood entirely upright on its hind legs, mocking humanity. I presume you possess the psychic transmission ability. We can converse, but regardless of your pleas, you trespassed upon my sovereign territory. Do not even dream of leaving this place with your life. Meow. My vision was obscured, but the arrogant, bloodthirsty smirk on that monster's face was unmistakable. The exact second its telepathic threat concluded, the phantom launched a blinding assault. Its velocity shattered the limits of mortal perception. A solitary predator was moving so incomprehensibly fast. It spawned the horrifying illusion of a massive pack ambushing me from every single angle. I never fathomed crossing paths with a nemesis possessing such overwhelming, logic-defying agility. If I simply fortified my vital organs and evaded an instantaneous execution, I could survive temporarily. However, this absolute monster's ridiculous mobility rendered all of my defensive tactics completely pathetic. Under this relentless barrage, I would be brutally shredded to pieces inevitably. And this demonic entity was radiating pure, unadulterated bloodlust. Staring down the barrel of total annihilation, I forcefully summoned my absolute system interface, without a singular ounce of hesitation. I had meticulously analyzed this evolutionary map previously. While its web appeared overwhelmingly intricate, the majority of abilities were mere enhancements or offshoots of core proficiencies, permanently locked behind foundational requirements. But those absolute Tier 1 primary talents? I had seared their paths into my memory, specifically for a life or death crisis like this. Activate Draconic Awareness. 1 evolution point extracted. Successfully acquired. Activate Cognitive Overclock. 1 evolution point extracted. Successfully acquired. Activate Resonant Shockwave. 5 massive evolution points. Drained entirely. Successfully acquired. A dazzling surge of golden data flooded my system tree as the specific pathways for draconic awareness and cognitive overclock violently ignited. My glowing pupils snapped wide. In a singular heartbeat, the fabric of reality fundamentally shifted. I pivoted violently, driving a devastating haymaker into the seemingly vacant space, directly behind my spine. A bone-shattering collision echoed as a fractured illusion blasted backward. Without wasting a single breath, I chained my counterattack by unleashing a catastrophic roar of my draconic inferno. The shadowy terror completely lacked the milliseconds required to scream. An apocalyptic tidal wave of azure flames utterly consumed the subterranean battlefield in a flash of divine judgment. Gasping for oxygen, I frantically summoned my status window. The internal toll had been dangerously extreme, but dwelling on mana depletion was a luxury I lacked. I immediately saw my designated experience. Gauge remained entirely stagnant. That meant one terrifying reality. The target was still breathing. Panic violently gripped my chest. Surviving a zero-distance execution from a void dragon's wrath was logically impossible. I cautiously advanced through the smoke until I located the heavily scorched monstrosity crumpled against the rocks. Only then did my racing heartbeat momentarily stabilize. However, the exact second my enhanced vision registered its true identity, a sickening knot of absolute horror formed in my gut. System scan complete. Mutated mongoose. Level 51. System alert. Humanoid species detected. A legendary mid-tier beast in its fully awakened human form. Reproductive value. Immeasurably high. Glaring at the glowing blue text, an unfamiliar ache suddenly twisted deep inside my chest. My ruthless hands trembled. I had almost slaughtered a mongoose. Normally, a mongoose is just standard cannon fodder on the dungeon's second floor, feline in nature, but possessing an eerily human face and twin tails. Under normal circumstances, encountering one would be completely unremarkable. But heavens above, I never could have predicted this twist of fate. Stumbling upon a mongoose that had achieved perfect human metamorphosis, it was utterly unheard of. Aside from those twitching cat ears and twin tails, her entire physique was flawlessly human, no matter how you looked at her. Even though scorching flames had ravaged over 80% of her delicate frame, traces of her original, breathtaking beauty remained. And me? The cold-blooded predator who never hesitated to execute a defeated foe? I found my killing strike paralyzed in mid-air. What are you waiting for? Just end my misery already, Nya. The feline girl glared up at me, her eyes ablaze with unyielding hostility. To be honest, her fierce defiance completely threw me off balance. My mind raced for a long moment before I spat out the most pathetic excuse. Feline meat is disgusting anyway. It is way too sour and tough. Besides, I have zero appetite for a scrawny meal. Hearing this, the shape-shifting beast let out a breathless, mocking scoff. You pity my pathetic state. Do you not? Is that why you are sparing me? Mark my words. Show me mercy today and tomorrow. I will be the one tearing out your throat. Nya. I casually waved off her dying threat. But one question was still gnawing at my mind. Why did you launch a suicide attack against me? I keep my dragon aura blazing at level 2, 24/7. Sure, it does not inflict physical damage, but the sheer pressure screams at weaker beings that I am an apex predator. Any beast with an ounce of survival instinct would never dare strike first. When she met my demand with stubborn silence, I stepped closer, repeating myself, this time leaking a dense, murderous intent. The beast girl winced, her golden eyes flashing with absolute humiliation before she finally snapped. You arrogantly strolled into my sacred territory, and then you dared to relieve yourself right in my home. Who else was I supposed to claw to death? I blinked twice, utterly stunned, as the memory of why I entered this damp cavern flooded back. Ah, she was absolutely right about that. Feline variants possess notoriously vicious territorial instincts. But hold on, this was the endless dungeon. Could basic animal instincts from the surface world truly survive in this hellscape? And setting that aside for a moment, even female cats will throw away their lives over turf? You triggered a deathmatch over something so trivial? Trivial? You wield such overwhelming power. You must be an apex overlord reigning over the second floor. How can an overlord be completely clueless about the absolute laws of the wild Nya? Well, the truth is, I have only been trapped inside this dungeon for less than 30 days. What? That is impossible. The surface world is an absolute paradise. Endless forests to freely roam. Some lucky beasts are even selected by the great humans to be their noble steeds. Guaranteed food for the rest of their lives. Why would any sane creature voluntarily descend into this miserable abyss? Nya. A paradise? Really? Her agonizingly naive worldview almost forced a bitter laugh past my lips. Sure, wandering beasts on the surface might never face starvation, but without the brutal, blood-soaked tempering that this dungeon provides, they remain hopelessly weak, nothing more than fragile prey, when heavily armed human raiding parties come to harvest them. And as for this glorious dream of becoming a human's mount, maybe a rare fraction of masters show a shred of kindness, but for the vast, tragic majority, it means their absolute freedom is violently ripped away, exploited for every drop of their worth until they shatter. They are no different from pathetic livestock rotting in a cage, waiting for the butcher's blade. 30 days of surviving this dungeon's hell has carved one undeniable truth into my soul. Yes, this underground labyrinth is a desolate slum, but it is the only true sanctuary where monsters can rule their own fate. However, I kept these dark truths to myself. There was no point shattering the dying girl's delusions. On the cavern floor, her slender, charred body began to violently convulse. The agonizing pain of her burns was finally taking over. What are you waiting for? I admit defeat. Just end my life already. Already. Do you take pleasure in my suffering? Meow. Astonishingly, there wasn't a single trace of dread in her trembling voice. Instead, she spoke with the weary relief of a soul who had finally been granted the sweet release of death. Her quiet surrender suddenly reminded me of what the nursing mother had whispered to me long ago. We creatures are spawned within the dungeon's dark womb. It is a heavy curse we drag with us from the moment of our first breath. For the longest time, I had deliberately sealed away my telepathic abilities, terrified that listening to the agonizing final pleas of my fellow beasts would erode my hardened resolve. Because no matter what monstrous shell I now inhabited, my human soul remained intact. I was still burdened with compassion and sympathy, but in this ruthless abyss, Shedding a single tear would only guarantee my own brutal demise. Perhaps it was a completely different instinct pulling at my heartstrings. Yet staring down at this mongoose's broken and miserable figure, my lethal intent wavered for a split second. Of course, I wasn't foolish enough to grant her mercy, knowing she might return to slit my throat in the future. But the very moment I lifted my razor-sharp claw to deliver the final strike, an apocalyptic explosion violently rocked the entire cavern, freezing my fatal blow in midair. Suddenly, the whole second floor of the labyrinth started to quake with catastrophic force. As if the very fabric of the world was ripping apart, those stubborn humans are clashing. Again, they truly are rushing toward their own graves. The injured beast's telepathic mutterings instantly ignited a blazing fire of sheer anticipation within my veins. I fiercely interrogated her without a second's delay. What humans? Just recently, a raid party launched a desperate crusade to conquer this domain, only to be utterly annihilated by the terrifying sovereign of the second floor. Meow. A handful of their cowardly commanders managed to escape, alongside their most inexperienced rookies. The remaining elite warriors bravely held the line, sealing their own fates in this hellish trap. They have been fighting a bloody war of attrition ever since, desperately trying to shatter the blockade and flee the second level. But defeating that monstrous overlord is an impossible dream. Meow. Each suicidal charge merely bathes the stone floors in more of their blood. An earth-shattering tremor of this magnitude, it must be their final, agonizingly desperate last stand. In those few fleeting sentences, she had unwittingly revealed a treasure trove of crucial intelligence that I desperately needed. But just as I opened my jaws to extract more secrets, the solid stone barricade next to us violently ruptured inward. From the chaotic dust emerged a striking youth, gripping a radiant, golden broadsword as he tumbled through the debris. A living, breathing human right before my eyes. The sheer disbelief paralyzed my senses for a moment. The human warrior locked eyes with me and the wounded beast simultaneously, and the fierce features twisted into absolute shock before he bellowed back toward the shattered crater he had just obliterated. Captain, there are demonic familiar beasts lurking in this chamber. I will exterminate them immediately. Concentrate all your holy power on the Overlord. Leave these filthy creatures to my blade. Without another word, he lowered his massive weapon into a lethal combat stance, his aura screaming that only one of us would leave this cavern alive. The unyielding disgust radiating from his glaring eyes left me utterly baffled. I had barely parted my jaws to clear up this monumental misunderstanding. But the instant the Crusader heard my strange vocalizations, instead of lowering his guard, his murderous intent skyrocketed to terrifying heights. Beads of icy sweat drenched his forehead as he frantically muttered under his breath. A mythic tier adolescent abomination. If we fail to obliterate it, right here and now, our next vanguard will have to face two absolute calamities. We are already dead anyway. So for the sacred future of humanity, I swear to chain this nightmare to this very room, even if I must sacrifice my very soul. An overwhelming tsunami of sheer exasperation crashed through my chaotic mind. Are you actually kidding me right now? That incredibly dramatic, self-sacrificing monologue was almost poetic enough to bring a fake tear to my eye. Hey, heroic idiot, are you even processing a word I am saying? The zealous knight's colossal blade suddenly hummed with a piercing resonance, and an ocean of suffocating, holy battle aura violently erupted from his very core. The blinding divine energy cascading off his armor miraculously multiplied, tenfold in the blink of an eye. Without hesitation, he launched himself forward like a heaven-piercing comet, shattering the ground beneath him and bridging the gap in a single, breathless heartbeat. System alert. Target identified. Holy Knight. Level 32. First class advancement completed. Elite tier human warrior. A terrifying opponent whose base stats completely outclass mine. If I were at my absolute peak, my divine skills would have obliterated him in seconds. But my battered body screamed in agony, making a head-on clash pure suicide. Plus, crossing blades with a mere mortal wasn't on my agenda. In that fleeting moment of hesitation, I casually sidestepped his lethal blade, snatched the complaining mongoose by the scruff of her neck, tossed her unceremoniously over my shoulder, and bolted like lightning away from the battlefield, leaving both the boss monster and the arrogant swordsman in my dust. The little furball was absolutely bewildered. One heartbeat she was bracing for impact, and the next, she was flying through the air against her will. What in the world are you doing, meow? Unhand me this instant, you brute. The dizzy creature threw an absolute tantrum, scratching and biting furiously at my scalp. Keep your mouth shut, I commanded with a menacing growl, instantly pinching her pressure point. A bright flush exploded across her furry cheeks. Her single torn ear plastered flat against her head, as she completely froze in utter submission. But the relentless swordsman was already closing the gap, unleashing a torrential storm of blinding golden aura strikes. I desperately rolled out of the kill zone, my internal fury boiling over. If my mana core wasn't completely drained, a pathetic weakling like you wouldn't dare look me in the eye, let alone hunt me down. But running on empty, I forced down my draconic pride and burned my absolute last fumes of stamina to escape. And so, the deadly marathon commenced. The stubborn human and the fleeing dragon, two blinding streaks of light tearing through the shadowy depths of the dungeon, locked in an endless game of cat and mouse. I honestly figured this fool would lose steam quickly. But, alas, after 2.5 agonizing hours of relentless pursuit, even though his lungs were begging for mercy, the madman simply refused to yield. My patience officially snapped. If we dragged this out any longer, his next desperate attack would undoubtedly be his grand finale. If he just sheathed his sword right now, I would gladly walk away and spare his miserable life. But if he dared to wager his soul on one final suicide charge, I swore to the heavens I would pulverize him. And wouldn't you know it? The exact second that lethal thought crossed my mind, the arrogant swordsman roared into the heavens. An earth-shattering battle cry echoed through the cavern. His blood vessels violently burst from the sheer pressure, as he channeled every ounce of his burning life force straight into the core of his blazing golden greatsword. Staring down the barrel of this apocalyptic, all-or-nothing execution, I merely exhaled a heavy, exhausted sigh. System command. Unlock invincibility. 5 unlock. Points successfully consumed. Supreme skill invincibility level 1. Activated. In a fraction of a heartbeat, I transformed into an unstoppable meteor, launching my entire body directly into the raging golden torrent. The absolute devastation was instantaneous. His ultimate sword aura shattered like fragile glass, as I drilled a massive, spiraling void straight through his ultimate technique. The foolish mortal's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. Never in his wildest nightmares did he expect his exhausted prey to suddenly bare its fangs, much less casually obliterate. An attack fueled by his very soul and absolute maximum mana. It was a complete and utter massacre of his pride, but he didn't even have a single second to process the despair. Boom! A deafening shockwave erupted as my draconic armor-plated skull crashed with catastrophic force directly into his stomach. A blood-curdling shriek tore from his throat, as his broken body was launched backward like a ragged doll, violently obliterating dozens of massive, ancient stone pillars in a blinding cloud of debris. he only came to a brutal halt. After cratering deep into the dungeon's reinforced bedrock, the instant my divine invincibility faded, my legs simply gave out. I collapsed into a trembling heap upon the cold stone floor. I desperately prayed for just one moment of peace, but a relentless tsunami of system notifications suddenly flooded my vision. Ding, ding, ding! My mind reeled. From the blinding golden text. Ever since my legendary evolution, the experience points needed to ascend had become astronomically absurd. The difficulty multipliers were simply outrageous. I honestly couldn't even remember the last time I had triggered a glorious chain of back-to-back level-ups. Just how terrifying was this human's actual combat rating? On par with a ferocious beast. Yet, slaying this supposedly fragile human had triggered an absolute explosion of power. I rocketed up 6 entire ranks in a single breath, skyrocketing from post-evolution level 11, all the way to level 17. That was nearly 12,000 experience points. It seriously felt like the cosmic system itself was begging me to hunt down more humans. Ding! System alert. Main quest unlocked. Objective: defeat the Floor 2 boss, Medusa's head. Quest reward: 50 unlock points. Hearing that massive bounty, the notification snapped me to full attention. After surviving absolute hell in this labyrinth, after every single blood-soaked battle I had barely crawled away from, even counting the 5 meager points I just earned, my grand total was a pathetic 35 unlock points. But now, this single, suicidal boss raid was dangling a whopping 50 points right in front of me. Suddenly, the beastly mongoose's trembling voice broke my focus. I glanced over my shoulder. Her eyes were blown wide with absolute terror, staring at me like I was some kind of eldritch horror. "How is this possible?" she stammered. "The second you slaughtered that human, your catastrophic injuries completely vanished. And that aura, why did your magical pressure suddenly detonate into something so terrifying?" The beast was paralyzed by pure shock. In the common sense of this fantasy world, a monster's evolutionary path should be an agonizingly slow and steady grind. But this monstrous juvenile dragon standing before her had merely executed one pathetic human and defied all laws of nature. Not only had its fatal wounds miraculously knit together, its combat power had transcended to a whole new realm in a heartbeat. She had never witnessed such broken logic. Staring down at her quivering, fear-struck form, I maintained an icy, unbothered smirk. "So, make your choice. Do you want to become my next meal right here? Or guide me to slaughter the Floor 2 boss? Have you completely lost your mind?" she shrieked. That is the apex predator of Floor 2. The only reason she doesn't hunt us down is because her colossal body is rooted to the earth. She rigidly guards all 3 abyssal gates. Then, 6. A terrifying realization dawned on her. The mongoose stared, frozen in absolute, soul-crushing dread. After a suffocating silence, she finally choked out, "You can't be serious. Are you actually plotting to assassinate Medusa's head just to break into Floor 3? Meow?" I didn't even bother speaking. I simply gave a sinister, bloodthirsty grin and nodded, forgetting her agonizing burns. The mongoose frantically raised her voice. "With your monstrous new aura, you could crush me like an insect. If you just avoid Medusa's horrifying domain, you could rule this entire level as an absolute tyrant. Why throw your life away in a suicidal death match for absolutely no reason? Meow?" I chuckled darkly. "You slipped up earlier. You said those human invaders are challenging the boss because it's the only ticket out of this cursed dungeon, right?" The instant those words left my mouth, the pieces clicked in the beast's mind. Wait, she gasped. Don't tell me a monster like you actually wants to escape to the outside world? My predatory smile widened. So descending deeper is the true exit. Spill it. How exactly do you breach the dungeon's boundaries? Are you trying to trick me into exposing the secrets? Meow? So what if I am? I challenged. You've already spilled half the truth. Might as well sing like a canary. Why in the world would I ever help you? The beast snapped defensively. Suit yourself, I said, my voice dripping with menace. I just happen to possess a terrifying mind-reading skill. Though, I hear it forcefully shatters the victim's sanity. If you keep your mouth shut, I'll just rip the answers from your brain. All the color drained from the mongoose's furry face. Horrific psychic abilities like that were legendary urban myths within the labyrinth. From floor 3 downward, nightmare-inducing psychic variants were infamous for torturing their prey, exactly like that. Sensing her absolute dread, I tightened the psychological snare. Spill the dungeon's secrets and swear loyalty to me. And not only will I spare your miserable life, I'll completely restore your mangled body. The classic carrot and stick method. As a veteran of survival, I knew exactly how to manipulate fear. Honestly, I really did possess the memory extraction skill, but activating it demanded a steep toll of 20 unlock points. If I could bluff my way out of spending my precious points, I absolutely would. The mongoose's battered ear flicked nervously at my tempting offer. After a suffocating, tension-filled pause, she finally met my draconian gaze, cautious but desperate. Do you actually mean that? Meow. I tapped my scaled chest with unwavering confidence. A dragon's word is an unbreakable vow. Completely taken aback. As we spoke, a startling truth revealed itself. There were actually multiple paths leading in and out of this cursed dungeon. Humans typically relied on spatial transfer magic, but such arcane arts were practically impossible for monsters to grasp. For a beast like us, trapped within these unforgiving walls, destiny offered only one brutal escape route. We had to slaughter our way from floor 1 all the way down to the abyssal depths of floor 5. And only after crushing the final boss on floor 5 could a monster finally shatter their chains and step into the outside world. Merely thinking about the legendary Leviathan's overwhelming, godlike aura made a violent shiver run down my spine. That terrified look on your face. Have you actually encountered the great Leviathan? Meow. I gave a heavy nod. Then, finally voiced the burning question that had been eating at my mind. But didn't you just explain that each floor functions as its own isolated dimension? That monsters are strictly forbidden from crossing between them? The absolute rules of this dungeon do not apply to him. Meow. He was once the sacred mount of an ancient deity, making him the supreme, unrivaled existence within this entire abyss. He shatters boundaries, moving freely between every single layer of hell. No weapon can pierce his scales. No force can halt his path. Meow. He only remains in this prison because it amuses him to do so. Therefore, your foolish dream of breaking free, in the end, it is nothing but a tragic delusion. Meow. As she uttered her final warning, the beast girl's remaining life force seemed to evaporate entirely, sending her collapsing onto the cold stone, desperately gasping for air. Her fatal wounds were heavily bleeding, and her vitality was draining away with every passing heartbeat. At this grim pace, she had perhaps 10 minutes left before her soul faded into the darkness for good. Watching her helpless body teeter on the very edge of oblivion, I made my choice. I accessed the system and sacrificed 4 unlock points on the Supreme Heal, skill and condensation art, miraculously purifying every single one of her devastating injuries. She violently shot up, from the blood-stained floor, staring at her completely restored hands and feet in sheer, unadulterated disbelief. What kind of dark magic did you just use, Meow? I cannot guarantee we will ever escape this hellscape, but I vow that you will never starve or face death alone on this floor again. Will you forge a pact and follow me? The fierce warrior was still paralyzed by the overwhelming shock. Her trembling eyes stared blankly at the mysterious, anomalous creature standing before her. Following a heavy, suffocating silence, she finally found her voice. So, you're actually plotting to sever Medusa's head? I nodded firmly. Your combat prowess is truly magnificent. You are undoubtedly the fiercest monster I have crossed paths with on floor 2, so far. Hearing that praise, her chest puffed out with undeniable warrior's pride. Obviously, Meow, on this entire parade level of the dungeon, the only entity who rivals my power is that vile witch Medusa herself. Meow. But then, her haughty tone shifted into something far more calculating. But why should I gamble my life for your ambition? Meow. If we destroy Medusa, you ascend to the absolute apex of floor 2, the undisputed queen of this entire territory. Doesn't that taste of supreme power tempt you? At those intoxicating words, her sensitive ear twitched violently. She slowly lowered her gaze, her lips silently forming the hypnotic phrase, Apex of God. The floor. Queen. Exactly 2 seconds later, she snapped her deeply flushed face upward and declared her resolve. Fine. Since you pulled me back from the jaws of death, I will lend you my claws. Just this once. By the way, are you supposed to be a majestic dragon? Or just some weird little dog? A dragon? Why? Does my aura not command respect? Wait, are you implying I resemble a mere canine? Yep, a tiny black puppy with a round little belly and a totally dog-shaped head. From this moment on, your official title is Dog Boy. I just stared at her, my draconic pride utterly shattered into speechless fragments. Wait, aren't you the sly one here? You toyed with that human until he was a broken mess before dealing the final blow, and then let yourself get hurt just to test my healing arts. Fine. Whatever. Call me what you wish. But what about you? What is your true name? I don't possess one. Beasts born within this endless darkness do not need titles. It's completely meaningless. Then it's settled. You claim the right to call me Dog Boy, so I shall dub you Cat Girl. Her furry tail violently slapped the stone floor in pure indignation. What kind of ridiculous, low-tier name is Cat Girl? Let's move. I waddled forward, leaving her swaying figure behind as she grumbled under her breath. I actually have a real name, you know. Despite her complaints, she bounded forward and matched my pace perfectly. A tense few minutes passed, bringing us to the dead zone, the threshold between floor 2 and floor 3. Down below, the human vanguard was locked in a desperate deathmatch against Medusa's head. I held my ground. Let the humans bleed it dry, then I would swoop in for the ultimate steal. Since awakening in this treacherous dungeon, I realized a terrifying truth. These monsters didn't understand the concept of system levels or skills. For them, growing stronger was just a bloody byproduct of surviving. Skills were merely fangs and claws to cheat death, and slaughter was just another meal. Therefore, discounting rare mutant anomalies like that mongoose, the beast here followed one absolute law. The longer you survive, the more monstrous your level becomes. Take Medusa's head, the tyrannical boss of the second floor. It had reigned here for at least 500 years. It lacked any mobility, yet it dominated the zone like an indestructible siege cannon, ruthlessly guarding the only passage, linking the second floor to the third. Any foolish human seeking to conquer this domain, and any ambitious beast clawing its way up, must cross that fatal choke point. As long as it held that throne, fresh prey practically served itself on a silver platter. I watched the human raiders hurl themselves at the boss in a relentless, suicidal tide. They charged without a sliver of hesitation, only to be brutally slaughtered. Judging by the sheer mountain of corpses, their assault force must have exceeded 200 elites. Now, barely a dozen souls remained breathing. Humans are such absolute fools, meow. They stare death in the face, yet they still rush into the abyss. Catgirl watched the massacre, like an entertaining stage play. My face remained completely hollow. Their pathetic lives meant nothing. I just needed their desperate struggle to carve away as much of the boss's health bar as humanly possible. The stats on that monstrosity were completely absurd. Challenging it at peak condition was basically begging for the grave. The humans' wave tactics ultimately collapsed, but they managed to inflict genuine, lingering damage. The boss wouldn't be this vulnerable again for a very long time, and I had absolutely no intention of letting the entire raid party wipe. Those surviving pawns still had tactical value. The head count dropped to 9. My mind raced, calculating every possible variable. I ran thousands of combat simulations in the blink of an eye. Medusa's head possessed a monstrous perception stat of 8,000. An ambush in the shadows was completely off the table, but a head-on clash, even with its health flashing red, promised 0 odds of survival. Staring at the system interface, I made my final gamble. I dumped absolutely every unlock point I possessed straight into Comet Strike. I would unleash the most catastrophic burst damage imaginable to completely shatter its remaining health pool. Then, I drag it into a brutal war of pure stamina. That was the one and only route to survival. I locked in the upgrade. 0 points remaining. Victory or death. From my brutal clash with that young knight, and everything I had witnessed in this hellhole, I knew these humans lacked the fundamental fear of their own demise. Pushed to the absolute brink, they would inevitably trigger a final, blazing death charge. Right on cue, the last 9 standing dragged their broken bodies up and shattered the silence. With an earth-shattering battle cry, 9 explosive pillars of crimson aura erupted, banishing the cavern's gloom with a blinding, midday brilliance. This was it. The perfect opening. I exchanged a sharp nod with Catgirl. We exploded into motion, riding the darkest edges of the shadows, creeping right up to the razor-thin boundary of the boss's sensory domain. Down in the bloodbath, the Crimson Warriors continued to drop. Soon, only 3 desperate souls remained standing, one using his own mangled flesh as a human shield. The absolute final pair of survivors. Closing the gap in a heartbeat, they launch into the sky, driving both spear and steel deep into the monster's flesh. Medusa unleashes a blood-curdling, with her physical defense shattered to 0. This desperate strike from 2 mere mortals shreds over 1,000 health points in a single, devastating blow. In that exact moment, the Beastkin girl seizes her golden opportunity. She rockets toward the demonic entity like a blinding flash of silver light. But facing a monster with a perception stat of over 8,000, she is still painfully slow. Half of the writhing serpents snap around, instantly, tracking her path as if predicting the future. Well, so the eternal loser thinks she can steal my prize? Absolutely perfect. I have been dying to devour you for centuries. This dark thought echoes through Medusa's mind. But in her arrogance, she completely overlooks a hidden third presence. System activated. Weak point break. Suddenly, sinister, glowing red markers ignite across the boss monster's twisted form. These are the fatal flaws in her armor. One clean strike guarantees maximum critical damage. I have been charging this up in the shadows. I channel my aura, stepping forward as the very earth shatters. Jagged boulders explode into the sky. My entire body transforms into a living comet, incinerating every stone pillar into a roaring river of magma. At level 5, my comet strike multiplies all my base attributes into raw, unadulterated, destructive force. A fully charged blast radiates a terrifying, godlike aura. The sheer, suffocating heat and overwhelming pressure atomize the serpents instantly. A catastrophic shock wave rips through the cavern. Medusa unleashes an agonizing scream, a chilling chorus of 1,000 tormented souls. The impact completely crushes her skull. This colossal terror, rooted to this spot for 400 years, is blasted over 100 meters across the arena, cratering deep into the dungeon walls. Breathing heavily, I ignore the pain. My piercing gaze locks onto the rubble, piercing through the suffocating clouds of debris. Only when the system flashes a beautiful 0 health do I finally release my breath. The two battered humans stand paralyzed, their eyes wide with sheer terror and awe. A monstrous beast just delivered their salvation. By the gods, the second floor ruler has fallen. You are right, King. The monsters annihilated each other, and we actually survived. The rugged, veteran knight trembles with intoxicating relief. Captain, what is our next move? The younger warrior asks nervously. Luo gulps down his fear, and the gratitude in his eyes is rapidly replaced by venomous greed. A beast is still a beast. This dragon might be a hatchling, but the monstrous aura pulsing from its core is terrifying. If we let it mature, humanity will face an unstoppable calamity. With cold malice, Luo tightens his grip on a shattered blade, limping menacingly toward my exhausted form. We might be destined to die in this abyss, but executing both the Serpent Queen and this vile dragon, that will enshrine our names as legends for generations. The young rookie Jiang wavers for a split second. Before yielding to the dark temptation of glory, I listen to their pathetic scheming, biting the hand that brings salvation. Classic, hypocritical human nature. But I simply smirk inwardly, because they are walking right into my trap. That ultimate attack completely drained my stamina reserves. To survive this cursed state, I need an instant level up. Humans are frail, but they are walking treasure troves of sweet experience points. I was going to slaughter them for fuel anyway. If they had groveled and shown gratitude, the guilt might have been annoying. But this betrayal? It is absolutely perfect. I couldn't have asked for a more perfect opening. But the moment the twin knights lunge, and my muscles coil to counter, a catastrophic shockwave shatters the cavern. The sheer force erupts from the exact crater where I crushed Medusa's skull moments ago. Stone turns to shrapnel as a monstrous serpent explodes outward, its massive jaws snapping Luo perfectly in half. My eyes widen as recognition hits. That is no ordinary monster. It is one of the viper strands from Medusa's severed head. Suddenly, the terrifying truth clicks into place. A cold realization washes over me. This is exactly why crushing that skull did not trigger a system notification. My experience points had remained completely frozen. A chorus of venomous hisses echoes from the shadows, surrounding us completely. My dungeon-forged survival instincts scream absolute danger. Without hesitating, my dragon claw pierces straight through an enemy chest. A brilliant golden light bathes my vision. System notification, level up. In a single heartbeat, the surging mana repairs my injuries, restoring me to absolute peak condition. Master, what is happening? Catgirl cries out in panic. Did we not already destroy that cursed head? Why are the serpents still attacking? A spine-tingling chill crawls down my neck as the deception becomes crystal clear. We walked right into a trap. That grotesque humanoid face was not the monster. It was nothing more than a fleshy decoy. The true horror is the legion of demonic vipers that made up its hair. The skull itself was just a biological anchor, a twisted hub designed solely for regeneration and control. And now, the unleashed swarm divides its endless fury. Hundreds of fanged demons split into two deadly tides. A violent wave crashes toward me, while the rest hunt down Catgirl. They are a writhing sea of death, launching relentless, blindingly fast strikes from every conceivable blind spot. And the absolute worst part? The system registers this massive swarm as one single terrifying entity. Slicing through a dozen of them is utterly pointless. But my mind races, calculating the single winning strategy. I effortlessly shred a lunging viper into bloody mist, then lock eyes with Catgirl. She is a blur of desperate motion. But even with her overwhelming agility, her blades have only managed to sever 5 or 6 demonic heads. If this brutal battle of attrition continues, our stamina will be bled dry. We will be eaten alive. I flash a desperate signal to Catgirl, ordering her to my side. By abandoning its central hub, Medusa's combat power has skyrocketed. However, shedding that skull comes with a fatal flaw. The beast has completely surrendered its demonic regeneration and magic resistance. All we need is one devastating, wide-area attack. One apocalyptic strike to incinerate the entire swarm simultaneously. That is the only way to wipe this abomination from the dungeon completely. And as fate would have it, I possess the exact legendary skill for the job. The ultimate draconic weapon, Void Dragon Breath. It is the absolute pinnacle of an ancient dragon's innate power, designed to rain sheer destruction over a massive battlefield. By fusing it with Comet Strike, the system forces a terrifying conversion, compressing my stats, health, and mana into pure, unadulterated ruin. The cost is incredibly severe. Unleashing this forbidden art will completely drain my life force, leaving me teetering on the edge of oblivion. It is a suicidal gamble I swore to never use, unless it was the only path to survival. And right now, it is. Catgirl finally breaches the swarm, reaching my side. The second she is close enough to safety, I violently shove her backward with my dragon claw, throwing her out of the blast zone. Over 200 demonic vipers lunge at my throat. I anchor my feet into the stone, standing like an immovable mountain. I unhinge my jaw, drawing in the very essence of destruction. Boom! A blinding torrent of azure flames detonates, flooding every inch of the subterranean cavern in a sea of blue fire. Over 200 nightmarish demons do not even get a fraction of a second to react. They are swallowed whole, erased completely by the suffocating, divine heat. But as I watch their charred scales crumble into ash, my heart sinks. I feel absolutely no victory. Because as the blazing inferno finally dissipates into embers, the silence is terrifying. Still no system notification. 0 experience points gained. My survival instincts scream as I scan the scorched ruins. Suddenly, the stone floor erupts. A blinding, golden viper shoots from the bedrock, its venomous fangs stretched wide. It is a flawless assassination strike, aimed directly between my eyes. The speed is godly. I only catch a blurred phantom of its movement. With my health completely drained, even a glancing blow will trigger instant death. My fate is sealed. Until the final fraction of a second, Catgirl, who had been hidden behind the jagged boulders, launches herself into the air with reckless abandon. She completely sacrifices her own safety, using her fragile body as a living shield to intercept the golden death. A sickening, bone-crunching snap echoes through the cavern. The golden viper's fangs sink viciously deep into her arm, triggering a catastrophic damage alert. Her already paper-thin health bar violently plummets into the single digits. Gritting, pushing past agonizing pain, the feline warrior unleashes every ounce of her remaining strength, ripping the monstrous serpent into shredded chunks that scatter across the battlefield. I instantly activate my truth skill to analyze the wreckage, only to be hit with a shocking revelation. This was the absolute core beast of Medusa's head. But the most unbelievable part? I had just been dragged from death's door by this foolishly brave companion. I stare at her, brutally fractured arm, my mind spinning with utter confusion. Why throw your life away for mine? By any cold logic, the smartest play was to let the monster slaughter me, and then claim the absolute victory over the exhausted beast. For yourself. Her face is terrifyingly pale, yet she forces a brilliant, bloody smile. Didn't we make a promise? Meow. We swore to obliterate this nightmare together. I get to rule as the supreme boss of the second floor, and you ascend to the third. Besides all that, you risked everything to save me. Earlier, there is no universe where I let you die. Meow. Her painfully naive words spark a strange feeling, deep in my chest. A bitter amusement, comparing this to the chilling betrayal and endless greed of humanity. It seems my long-held faith in mankind's supremacy is due for a massive reality check. I march toward the vile remains of the Medusa beast, crushing its shattered skull beneath my heel. I grab the glowing core fragments, toss them straight into my mouth, and swallow the raw power whole. System alert. Main quest 50% complete. Unlock points acquired. Current level, skyrocketing to level 20. Evolution conditions fully met. The sweet chime of the system is the only thing that shatters my battle focus. I finally let go of the tension and collapse into the dirt, gasping heavily as the adrenaline fades. Instantly, my feline companion tackles me in a crushing embrace, overwhelmed with pure joy, aggressively nuzzling my chest like the world is ending. I must admit, her human transformation certainly comes with some overwhelming tactical advantages. I immediately cast Condensate and heal to mend her shattered bones. Once she is stabilized, I turn my gaze toward the fallen beast domain. The gateway to the third floor has completely materialized. But the moment my foot shifts toward the dark abyss, she speaks up. A heartbreaking reluctance paints every inch of her expression. We are the ultimate duo. If you just stayed here, we would be absolute gods on this floor. Meow. Suddenly, a wild idea lights up her eyes, her cheeks flushing bright red as she declares, "You have the brilliant brain, and I have the terrifying brawn. I will rule as the Prost, queen of the second floor, and you can be my legendary royal strategist." I am completely speechless. Whatever wild feline logic possessed her to dream up such a fantasy is totally beyond me. I just shrug it off. Thanks, but no thanks. My soul craves the boundless blue skies and the blazing warmth of the real sun above. Without another moment of hesitation, I dive headfirst into the plunging corridor. She instinctively lunges to follow my shadow, but my voice echoes back from the deep dark depths. Rule this domain well. There is nothing left here that can ever threaten you. Until destiny crosses our paths again, my brave feline. To any ordinary mortal, this descending tunnel would be an absolute death sentence. But to me, it is the glorious staircase leading to ultimate freedom. However, the very next second, a wave of soul-crushing regret hits me. Floor 1 was a jagged, rocky hellscape. Floor 2 was a rotting, muddy abyss. But absolute nightmare logic could never have prepared me for this. The third floor is an endless apocalyptic wasteland of frozen despair, stretching infinitely into the horizon. A blinding canvas of frost, where the temperature sits at a devastating minus 150 degrees. Fighting the lethal chill, I frantically rip open my system interface for the second evolution paths. My frozen eyes widen in sheer disbelief. The original 3 paths remain untouched, but miraculously, glowing with an ancient aura, a secret 4th option has fully manifested. Minor Ice Dragon, a hyper-rare bloodline forged in the crucible of absolute zero, triggered solely by my soul's desperate, burning obsession to find a supreme heat source within this frozen abyss. A legendary, microscopic probability evolution, unlocking the divine innate. Skill, absolute ice immunity. With my vitality literally freezing away by the second, I lock in the minor ice dragon path without a single blink of hesitation. Just like before, let the ancient metamorphosis begin. Ding! The system chime rings out, and my evolution finishes in a sudden flash. Every single pitch black, violet scale sheds from my newly forged body. But right as I open my status window to check my incredible new stat gains, a heart-stopping scream echoes from right above my head. I snap my gaze upward, only to see a massive shadow plummeting straight toward me like a falling meteor. I have 0 time to dodge. Boom! A critical hit. Didn't I tell you to get out of the way, meow? Once we gather our bearings and scout the area, the horrifying truth sets in. The 3rd floor is absolutely nothing like the previous zones. It is an absolute domain of eternal winter, a blinding wasteland of frost. Even the monsters lurking here are semi-transparent, crafted from solid frost, and looking exactly like moving ice statues. And their threat level? Every single one is level 70 or higher. To conquer this frozen hellscape as fast as humanly possible, the Cat Beastman and I decide to start a massive hunting spree to power level our stats. And so, after 10 grueling days of pushing past our limits, adapting to the biting cold, and ruthlessly slaughtering thousands of these frozen abominations in a total blood frenzy, I finally break through to my second evolution. Level 8. Since the system resets your base level after a major class change, my true combat power is now equal to a staggering level 88 boss monster. The cat girl, soaking up all that sweet party experience, skyrocketed from level 51 to level 62 in that exact same time frame. But as our power continually rises, I start sensing something terribly unnatural about this frozen canyon. Because the monsters wandering outside the valley are mostly low-tier fodder, I shifted our hunting grounds completely to the inner depths. The Crimsonwood snow wolves on the outskirts might look like statues of frost, but their blood is translucent and their flesh is bone white. They are still flesh and blood creatures. But the snow wolves lurking deep inside the canyon, their entire bodies are forged from pure magic ice, holding 0 traces of actual flesh or blood. But the most glaring system anomaly, back at level 5, crushing 1 granted me 200 experience points. Yet now, at level 8, even with my intensified growth skill active for double the usual experience, shattering a snow wolf barely drops 50 points. This sinister revelation points to a genuinely terrifying possibility. I drag my companion along, and we plunge even deeper into the freezing abyss. Along our path, we clash with a bizarre variety of monsters, but without fail, every last one of them is an empty shell of ice. They have 0 survival instinct, 0 intelligence, and 0 capacity to communicate. But the true horror awaits in the deepest shadows. I discover a human figure entirely encased and corrupted by solid frost. That chilling sight confirms my absolute worst fear. Every frost single beast in this valley is nothing but a mind-controlled puppet, And judging by the fact that there are literally zero weaklings mixed in, the hidden mastermind controlling this army must possess an overwhelmingly monstrous mana pool. It has to be the supreme ruler of the third floor, the mythical ice Phoenix. My companion and I pushed through the blizzard for 3 agonizing days. After an absolute bloodbath, relentlessly, shattering wave after wave of summoned puppets, my stats surged to second evolution, level 11. Meanwhile, the cat girl violently grinds her way up to level 75. But here is the cruel truth of the system. Leveling up heals physical wounds, but does absolutely nothing for mental exhaustion. The poor beastman has barely slept a wink, and her legs are practically giving out with every step. I am completely wiped out. Meow. Can we seriously just take 5 minutes to breathe? I glare ahead. The floor boss is lurking right around the live next corner. We can rest when the monster is dead. If you are at your limit, stay behind. With your agility stats, you could catch up to me in less than an hour anyway. She shoots me a furious glare, her face contorting. It is obvious. She refuses to abandon her party leader to face the boss alone. She aggressively grits her fangs and forces herself to keep marching forward. You crazy dog boy, you have been acting seriously unhinged lately. Meow. Why are you rushing straight into the jaws of death just to kill the boss? The answer is simple. I need extreme power, and I need it now. I am going to slaughter Leviathan and break out of this cursed dungeon once and for all. My driving force has never changed. No matter what kind of monster I have mutated into, my soul is still entirely human. All I want is to return to a normal, peaceful life. This endless battlefield is not where my destiny ends. The cat girl opens her mouth, a complicated emotion flashing in her eyes. But just as she is about to speak, seeing the unyielding iron resolve burning in my eyes, she bites her lip hard and forces herself to fall in step. Suddenly, the narrow canyon gives way to a breathtakingly vast, frozen expanse. My footsteps grind to a halt. Why the sudden stop? Meow. Did you spot the third floor? Boss? Catgirl tracks my gaze forward. There, upon the desolate tundra, a colossal ice phoenix rests absolutely motionless inside a frozen nest. It was as if this majestic creature had been waiting for us since the beginning of time. Target identified. Ice Phoenix. Level 176. Rare. Near superior class beast. Potential breeding value. Immeasurable. This is the absolute first time I have ever laid eyes on a monster boasting 4 and 5-digit stats across its entire 6-dimensional status panel. It is honestly hard to fathom that this absolute behemoth is merely the third floor boss. However, raw numbers mean absolutely nothing on an actual battlefield. Masterful skill application, ruthless tactics, and blood-forged instincts. Those are the true metrics that dictate who stands victorious and who turns to dust. I take a bold step forward. To my absolute shock, the Ice Phoenix speaks directly into my mind. Why have you come to shatter my eternal peace? Since the beast is willing to parley, I play along. The gateway to the 4th floor lies directly beneath your nest. Does it not? We are descending to the 4th floor. If you simply step aside, neither of us has to spill blood today. The great avian shifts its crystal-clear gaze toward me. Then, after a heavy, suffocating silence, it murmurs, I only wish to remain here beside my child, until the very end of eternity itself. Why must you mortals shatter my sacred stillness? My eyes dart beneath its massive frame. There, resting in the frost, is a smaller phoenix, reduced to nothing but frozen bone. Is that skeleton your child? The majestic avian offers no reply. It merely casts its gaze down at the tiny remains with an ocean of boundless tenderness, as if the fledgling were merely sleeping. But I have absolutely zero patience for this tragic display, nor do I care about its sob story. I drop into my combat stance and prepare to unleash hell. Catgirl watches my aura flare, visibly trembling at the thought of clashing with the ice. Sovereign. This hesitation is not born from misplaced sympathy or tragic pity, but purely because she genuinely believes we are marching toward our doom. But I do not give a damn about the odds right now. Whatever tragic fate befell you and your offspring, I only care about breaching the fourth floor. Triggered by my cold declaration, the Ice Phoenix slowly raises its crowned head, piercing me with a chilling, terrifyingly warm stare. It whispers in that eerie, incomprehensible tone. Ah, I see you also. Desperately wish to become a playmate for my beloved child. Snap. My final shred of patience vaporizes. I cut the conversation dead. Igniting my pulse energy, I launch myself forward like a devastating blue-green meteor and crash directly into the Ice Phoenix with world-shattering force. I force my jaws wide open and detonate 3 back-to-back blasts of Void Dragon Breath Pulse. Following my lead, Catgirl whips both of her razor-sharp forelimbs in a deadly flurry, launching dozens of crescent wind blades all at once. Our combined onslaught rains down upon the Ice Phoenix like a cataclysmic storm, violently shredding its health bar all the way down to a mere 1/5. Yet, I feel zero triumph, only a creeping, suffocating dread. Because from the absolute split second this battle commenced, the Ice Phoenix has not launched a single counterattack. It has not even flinched from its frozen throne, standing there like an ancient monument, completely and utterly unfazed by our fury. No matter what apocalyptic damage we inflict, my survival instincts are screaming at me to fall back. But just as I gather aura to fire the ultimate, finishing blast of Void Dragon Breath, dozens of grotesque ice beasts violently erupt from the jagged cracks of the canyon walls. And at that exact, terrifying moment, the Ice Phoenix, which had remained as immovable as a mountain, finally awakens. It snaps its colossal, crystalline wings wide open. The stampeding ice beasts suddenly begin to brutally crumble apart, melting down chunk by chunk. They dissolve instantly into streams of frigid, glowing water, which wildly flood straight into the Ice Phoenix's core, instantly snapping its critically low health bar all the way back to 100% in a mere heartbeat. My stomach plummets into an absolute abyss. The Ice Phoenix is clearly done playing the passive victim. It fiercely beats its legendary wings with explosive, world-rending force, conjuring a catastrophic hurricane beyond any mortal comprehension. Frost begins to devour my fingertips and toes, and within a single breath, my entire torso is sealed in unbreakable ice. My consciousness bleeds away into the absolute zero void. Through the fading darkness, a desperate voice pierces my mind. Dog boy, run! You miscalculated. We are no match for this monster. After that, the abyss swallows me whole. When I finally regain my senses, time itself feels distorted. I slowly open my heavy eyelids, realizing I am no longer in the frozen canyon. Hovering right in front of me is an ancient creature resembling an elder deer, offering a warm, grandfatherly smile. You are awake? A sharp, terrified shriek instantly rips across the desolate snowfield. 60 seconds later, I am sprawled out on the frozen earth, my heart still hammering against my ribs, gasping for dear life. I stare up at the endless sky, utterly unable to believe that this colossal, mysterious beast did not just devour me while I was completely defenseless. Not only that, He actually shielded me with his massive body, standing guard for an entire day, and night until I awoke naturally. So, there really are benevolent beings in this cursed dungeon? This completely shatters everything I thought I knew. So, are you the one who saved me? I ask. With extreme caution, the bald-headed ancient beast looks genuinely surprised. Oh? You can communicate. You know how to use telepathy. 2. I nod, feeling incredibly awkward. Wait, didn't I just speak out loud? The bald head tilts gently to one side. My deepest apologies. I have been alive for so many eras that my memory has grown quite fuzzy. But the one who actually saved you was not me at all. It was your loyal companion. I blink, completely stunned. That mongoose of yours. How could you possibly forget the mongoose? Cat girl. I freeze entirely on the spot. Shattered fragments of memory flash through my mind like a spinning lantern. I remember the ice phoenix and its terrifying, absolute zero aura. It had already sealed my entire body in inescapable ice. But in that desperate, fleeting moment, Cat Girl stepped forward. She charged straight through the blizzard, burning every last drop of her life force to hurl me completely out of the beast's deadly nest. Her final cry echoes in my soul. Dog boy, come back and save me. The full, crushing weight of reality strikes me like a physical blow. I instantly drop to my knees. My chest feels exactly as if it has been seized by an invisible, demonic fist and utterly crushed. The brutal, unforgiving truth and my pathetic helplessness crash over me like a tidal wave, dragging me into the abyss. If I had only been slightly more cautious, absolutely none of this tragedy would have happened. If not for Cat Girl's sacrifice, the frozen corpse lying in that nest would have been mine. That brave feline companion of yours threw you all the way to the rim of the ice valley, and I simply happened to be wandering by. Honestly speaking, it has been an eternity since a beast of your unique caliber has appeared on the dungeon's 3rd floor. So, I figured, why not bring you into safety? Back in the ancient era, when I fought in the Great Dark Valley War, I had a fiercely loyal comrade like that, too. But wait, you do not look nearly devastated enough. Is that feline not your sworn comrade? The elder beast tilts his head, genuinely puzzled. She was just a foolish cat. She traded her own life to secure yours. How can you stand there looking so painfully unfazed? What exactly am I supposed to do? I turn my back, marching straight toward the deadly ice valley. The elder beast instantly materializes right in my path. Why are you blocking my way? Because I see a foolish young pup marching blindly toward his own demise. Stopping you is simply an elder's duty. Cat Girl is dead, and her blood is entirely on my hands. Avenging her soul is my absolute responsibility. My words ring out through the frosty air, dripping with an unbreakable, iron resolve. The elder beast says absolutely nothing. His ancient gaze drifts downward, noticing my trembling form. My 2 dragon claws are balled into fists so incredibly tight that crimson blood seeps out from between my scales. The elder beast smiles knowingly, as if recalling a fond memory from a bygone age. After a heavy, drawn-out silence, he finally speaks. What if I told you that your precious comrade is not dead? Those impossible words hit me like a divine lifeline. I snap my head around, finding the elder beast watching me with that same warm smile. It absolutely does not look like a lie. The Ice Phoenix's frozen puppets possessed an absolutely terrifying level of realism. That was all thanks to her twisted summoning technique, a forbidden art known as bone-flesh substitution. Since the dawn of the ancient era, Fewer than 10 beings have ever awakened this terrifying skill. It stands at the absolute pinnacle of the rarest abilities in existence. Usually, summoned beasts are mere shadows of their former selves. But bone-flesh substitution creates monsters that rival or even surpass their original power. Why? Because it does not copy. It steals. It mercilessly hunts down a target, murders them, but chains their soul to this world. It completely shatters their mind and slowly rebuilds their flesh out of pure demonic ice. It was not a summoning art. It was absolute puppetry. This explained why slaughtering her ice beast still granted experience points. Every single monster roaming the ice valley was a tragic puppet dancing on the strings of the ice phoenix. This entire third floor has been under that tyrant's absolute domain for ages. Aside from a few pathetic stragglers hiding in the shadows, any creature with a spark of power was forcefully twisted into an ice puppet. The sheer weight of this terrifying truth crashed over me like a tidal wave. But wait, what did any of this mean for Catgirl? Was there still a chance she was alive? I demanded answers. The ancient beast's voice rumbled on. Bone-flesh substitution was a god-tier skill, but its fatal flaw was its excruciatingly slow execution time. The freezing energy had to corrupt and replace the victim's flesh, cell by microscopic cell. Only through this agonizing process could the soul be kept intact. Based on that little feline stats, her complete transformation would take exactly 2 weeks. Slay the Ice Phoenix before that hourglass runs out, and supreme healing magic could still save her life. 2 weeks. A blazing spark of hope ignited within my darkened heart. Losing my healer had already shattered my spirit. If Catgirl perished because of my weakness, the agonizing guilt would suffocate me for eternity. This revelation hit my system like a divine thunderbolt. My foolish arrogance got her captured, so risking everything to save her was my absolute duty. Thank you, Venerable Elder. My path is finally clear. Hearing my fierce resolve, the massive beast let out an earth-shaking roar of laughter. I have simply roamed this world for too many eras. It is quite rare to stumble across a newborn candle dragon. Offering a little guidance was simply a fun way to pass my endless, boring existence. Those words completely paralyzed me. Wait! Right now, my aura was perfectly masked as a low-tier ice dragon. My true candle dragon bloodline was suppressed deep beneath 2 entire evolutionary stages. How in the world did this ancient monster see right through my disguise? Then, another chilling realization struck me. It just claimed that absolutely everything on this third floor had been conquered by the Ice Phoenix. But this majestic, towering giant was no mere straggler. So how did it survive the tyrant's icy wrath? A terrifyingly mischievous glint flashed across the colossal beast's eyes. It was as if it could read my very soul. Boy, do you not possess the divine ocular skill known as truth? Now that is a truly broken, heaven-defying ability. Since the dawn of time, you are the only mortal to wield it. The only other user was an actual god. Why not activate your precious truth and gaze upon my true form? My mind went completely blank. It even knew about my ultimate hidden trump card? Then, please forgive my absolute disrespect. Ancient Elder, I forcefully steadied my trembling breath, locked eyes with the towering behemoth, and unleashed truth. The moment the golden system interface appeared, my vision violently swam. My knees entirely buckled, and I crashed helplessly into the snow, because this seemingly tranquil beast standing before my eyes was a supreme divine entity, a monstrous existence surpassing even the legendary Leviathans. System warning. Target name Babylon. Level 413. Class Supreme Divine Beast. You Just what kind of monster are you? My voice shivered in raw terror, but the great Babylon merely smiled. In absolute silence, he slowly lifted his majestic gaze toward the endless sky, an enigmatic smirk gracing his features. A gentle smile formed, as if he were reminiscing about a beautiful, ancient era. Following a heavy, profound silence, he finally murmured, "In the ancient past, I waged war against 1,000,000 demon gods. With a mere snap of my fingers, I shattered the boundary between dawn and dusk. But now, I walk this path alone, content and quietly grateful to be lost to history." The truth was finally revealed. When the absolute beings first forged this dungeon, they engineered a terrifying dual boss structure. However, as the eons passed, the great sage Babylon grew incredibly weary of the endless slaughter and the burden of all worldly affairs. As the weight of centuries crept in, he completely withdrew to the third floor. It was the most peaceful sanctuary in the tower, leaving the overwhelmingly powerful Leviathan to brutally rule over the nightmare-inducing dungeon alone. Hearing this legendary backstory, I could only force a bitter, self-deprecating, I smiled to my lips. I was barely halfway through this hellish trial, and yet I had already come face to face with both of the ultimate final bosses. Was this heaven-defying luck, or an absolute curse? I honestly could not say. But at the very least, unlike the bloodthirsty Leviathan, the sage Babylon was approachable, emitting zero killing intent. Honored Elder, I asked, can I truly defeat the monstrous Ice Phoenix and save Catgirl? The ancient sage did not answer immediately. There was a profound reason why he and Leviathan were stationed together at the apex of this dungeon. Leviathan represented absolute, overwhelming destructive force, and Babylon, he was the ultimate embodiment of divine wisdom. He pondered for a moment, then reflected the long, heavy question right back at me. Young one, this is the dungeon. Out of every monstrous beast you have slaughtered so far, was there even a single one that did not vastly outlevel you? The sage's piercing yet gentle gaze sent an absolute tremor through my very soul. This was not mere kindness. It was profound enlightenment. It was 1,000 unspoken lessons compressed into a single question. By a true master, in a flash of terrifying clarity, I understood the crushing weight behind his words. No matter how detached this ancient sage was from the mortal realm, he was fundamentally a dungeon boss, and so was the Ice Phoenix. Saving my life was merely a whim of appreciation, acknowledging a rare genius born within the dungeon's cruel walls. But as the ultimate guardian, the heavens would fall before Babylon ever taught an outsider how to slaughter a fellow ruler. I bowed my head deeply in thought, processing this profound truth, before finally standing tall. I am forever grateful, honored elder. I fully understand my path. With renewed resolve, I turned toward the freezing depths of the ice valley. 2 weeks? No. 10 days. 14 days was cutting it far too close. Catgirl's life force might flicker out before then. 10 days. That was my absolute, non-negotiable deadline, factoring in the 10 days. Hours I spent unconscious. I had exactly 9 days remaining, and I swore to the heavens, not a single second would be wasted. Standing before the imposing gates of the ice valley, I gripped a massive boulder of ice, weighing over 10 kilograms. My aura flared. I channeled every ounce of my physical might, perfectly fusing it with my explosive pulse energy, and hurled the projectile into the abyss. The sheer, devastating kinetic force behind the throw transformed a mere rock into an artillery strike. It violently smashed into the glacial wall over a kilometer away, echoing with a deafening boom. The explosive shock wave of sound instantly awakened the demonic swarm. The ice-bone kites clinging to the cliffs shrieked in absolute fury. In mere moments, over 2 to 3,000 of the grotesque winged beasts, lurking near the entrance, took to the frozen skies, blotting out the light. A truly apocalyptic swarm. Yet, staring down this nightmare, a savage grin stretched across my face. Here was the brutal reality. The legendary Ice Phoenix possessed a broken regeneration ability, constantly feeding on its own ice. Puppet minions to heal. As long as a single frozen minion remained in this hellscape, the boss was practically immortal. And worse, every single creature in this entire valley had been corrupted into its personal blood bag. The solution was brutally simple. Annihilate its healing source, while aggressively farming for my own evolution at the exact same time. System open. Right before crossing the threshold, I cashed in 40 unlock points to forcefully upgrade my intensified growth skill straight to level 2. This god tier passive generated 2 experience points every single minute out of combat, and exponentially quadrupled all the experience gained from every brutal slaughter. I lowered my center of gravity, locking into my martial stance, and aimed a devastating dragon claw straight toward the sky, full of monstrous ice bone kites. 9 days to completely eradicate this frozen hell. And you pathetic beasts? You are merely my first course. And just like that, 6 grueling days vanish into the abyss. As the final pureblood Kato, beast puppet crumbles to dust, my exhausted body finally betrays me, crashing hard against the frozen earth. System alert. Pureblood Kato beast lineage successfully eradicated. Annihilation reward of 20. System points acquired. Total accumulated points, 416. Cultivation tier advanced to level 16. A cold smirk crosses my face. That makes the 11th species of icebone. 6 entire days. I have danced on the razor edge of death more times than my fractured mind can. Remember, at my current cultivation stage, even slaughtering the final 2 puppet bloodlines will not grant me a single level up. But I must push forward regardless. Erasing the Ice Phoenix's legendary immortality is only half the battle. The true goal is farming 90% more system points. To secure an absolute victory, I must awaken 2 specific, game-changing skills. Meanwhile, deep within the frostbitten abyss of the Ice Valley, the legendary Ice Phoenix glares at a shadowy silhouette trapped within a glacial egg. Utterly bewildered, 10 full days have passed. By all natural laws, a pitiful level 75 beast should have been completely liquefied down to its very core by now. Yet the cat girl trapped inside shows a mere 20% of frostbite corruption. The rest of her physical vessel remains miraculously pristine. The ancient Ice Phoenix can sense it, even buried under a mountain of frozen unconsciousness. This feline warrior harbors something terrifyingly profound at the center of her soul. A blazing, unyielding devotion. That very emotion acts as an absolute shield, preventing her life force from freezing over. It is the sole reason the bone flesh assimilation process is crawling at a snail's pace. But even the most unbreakable spirit shatters. In the end, right now, the ancient bird's eyes are completely devoid of frustration. Instead, they burn with a twisted, suffocating obsession. To this legendary beast, she is the ultimate, flawless, puppet vessel. But suddenly, a deafening voice shatters the absolute zero silence of the frozen domain. The Ice Phoenix shudders down to its legendary tail feathers. It snaps its massive head up, glaring in pure shock at the lone dragon-type beast standing arrogantly in its sanctuary. You have already tasted my divine wrath. How dare you return to your grave? In a mere 9 days, the murderous aura bleeding from my scales has amplified more than tenfold. I meet the ancient monsters. Legendary gaze without blinking. My eyes are pools of frozen pride as I speak with chilling calm. Did your mother never teach you? Kidnapping someone against their will carries a heavy penalty. This time, the Ice Phoenix's arrogant mockery is nowhere to be found. For the first time, it is staring at me like an actual, mortal threat. 9 days ago, the legendary bird had been mildly amused to find a resilient insect crawling around the third floor. But in its arrogant eyes, I was merely a fleeting entertainment. At best, just a slightly oversized bug destined to be crushed. But now, after a microscopic 9 days, she stares at my small, dragon-like frame and sees an unimaginable evolution, a miraculous metamorphosis that flips common sense on its head. I do not know how much time Cat Girl has left. I waste no breath on monologues. Taking a single, explosive step, my body warps into a streak of devastating lightning, rocketing straight toward the Ice Phoenix's colossal face. With zero hesitation, I plant a brutal kick directly between its eyes. The raw impact detonates a crescent shockwave, slicing the frozen earth apart like a divine blade. The ancient bird snaps out of its daze. Blazing fury ignites in its soul as its deadly eyes lock onto my figure. Its jaws rip open, unleashing a catastrophic torrent of absolute zero breath. But the very second the frost leaves its beak, the Ice Phoenix freezes in absolute terror. The tiny dragon that had just struck its face has completely vanished into thin air. Eyes up here, you oversized pigeon. My arrogant voice echoes from the heavens above. The legendary beast violently jerks its head up, realizing that I have somehow ascended nearly a full kilometer into the sky. Deep within my jaw, a void dragon. Breath is fully charged. It burns with a heat so apocalyptic that the very fabric of space is melting around it. Last time it took 4 blasts of my void dragon breath head-on. Back then, the Ice Phoenix relied entirely on its legendary immortality. It watched our desperate, all-out assault like it was a pathetic clown show, never once taking us seriously. But this time, everything has completely changed. A primal instinct, dormant for over 1,000 years, is practically screaming at the beast. If it dares to tank this attack the same way, even if it somehow survives, its fighting spirit will be utterly shattered in a mere 1/1000th of a 2020. Second, the Ice Phoenix erupts with an unimaginable surge of raw mana. It frantically throws up layer after layer of absolute frost barriers right above itself. Exactly 5 solid layers in total. High above the divine bird, an utterly impenetrable frozen fortress takes shape. Hear my roar. Void. Sky pierce. I unleash a massive boulder of apocalyptic flames, hundreds of meters wide, roaring straight out of my jaws. It completely scorches the heavens, painting the entire sky into a blazing sheet of blood red. The first frost barrier doesn't even make contact before it is instantly vaporized into absolute nothingness. Then goes the second, the third, and the fourth. The Ice Phoenix's majestic face goes completely white with primal terror. In an absolute flash, the final frost barrier is violently pierced. The apocalyptic boulder of fire crashes violently through the frozen nest and drives straight through the Ice Phoenix's actual body in one catastrophic shot. A completely devastated, eardrum-shattering, piercing cry from the mighty beast rips violently through the entire frozen valley. A single, devastating strike, and exactly half its life force is completely erased. If it wasn't for those 5 frantic frost barriers absorbing the bulk of the destructive power, that single blow would have been more than enough to obliterate the Ice Phoenix outright. It gasps in horror. How? Just how did a lowly creature get this incredibly strong? I keep my ultimate guard strictly up against the legendary beast, who is currently writhing on the shattered ground in pure agony. I shift into the intense stance of a warrior fighting with absolutely everything on the line. That monstrous attack wasn't simply my standard void dragon breath, concentrated by carefully controlling its deadly spread. No, it was a supremely advanced innate skill. I completely burned through a massive 300 system unlock points just to forcefully awaken the superior, ultimate form of my dragon breath, the legendary Void Sky Pierce. It is the absolute most powerful divine technique belonging to the ancient dragon race, an art that not even the highest gods can ever hope to possess. The arrogant Ice Phoenix stares up at me in world-shattering disbelief. No matter how incredibly good your combat skill is, your raw, underlying power should be nowhere near mine. So, tell me, how is this even remotely possible? I smirk coldly. A divine beast of your high tier should definitely possess the skill appraisal ability, right? Why don't you take a good look for your damn self? I declare it plainly. The skill appraisal is typically considered a rather common system ability. Its core effect operates essentially as a highly simplified version of the ultimate truth ability, simply lacking truth's godlike capabilities. But, much like the Eye of Truth, it completely allows you to read another living being's level and core stats, naturally casting appraisal right before a brutal fight. To accurately gauge the power gap between both sides is absolutely standard practice in nearly every single life or death battle. However, since this arrogant bird had already checked my pathetic stats exactly 9 days ago, the mighty Ice Phoenix didn't even bother to look at me this time around. But the very second it reads my newly updated stats again, today, the Ice Phoenix's icy pupils violently shrink down to absolute pinpricks, and the exact moment its gaze lands on one very particular plan's newly acquired skill, the sheer, suffocating shock it feels is completely immense. The divine skill, blood lineage optimization. It forcefully adjusts the user's base physiology straight to its absolute optimal, godlike state. It permanently skyrockets all core attributes by a massive 50%, and that entirely includes all future stat gains from simply leveling up. Furthermore, whenever I am facing severely overpowered enemies of a vastly higher level, the system automatically provides level compensation to completely offset any unfair level suppression, scaling up to a staggering maximum of 40 levels. It sits proudly listed alongside the legendary Void Sky Pierce in the absolute top-tier god skill group of my evolutionary skill tree. The heavy cost? Exactly 200 system unlock points. It provides an insane attribute boost that is perfectly on par with undergoing a complete, monstrous evolution. A solid 40 levels of sheer system compensation entirely renders the arrogant Ice Phoenix's overwhelming level advantage essentially totally irrelevant. And finally, we have the rapid regeneration ability. That incredibly underwhelming, trash tier skill I had previously completely dismissed, it now finally has its shining, glorious moment. For a measly cost of merely 5 unlock points, it quietly and passively restores both my health and mana reserves. As long as I can go for more than 10 seconds without taking direct damage or heavily expending my precious resources. Exactly 505 total unlock points burned. Literally nearly every single thing I had to my name. But in return, it gives me the absolute power of a god. The very foundation to stand against a legendary beast like the Ice Phoenix. You even dare to shatter the fragile peace, my child, so dearly cherished. The Ice Phoenix unleashes a deafening roar, snapping its crystalline wings wide open. Faced with my overwhelmingly transformed power, the beast finally realizes it has no choice but to get completely serious, drain the ice puppets to recover life force, boost its stats to the absolute limit, and then overwhelm any opponent through sheer, terrifying numbers. That has always been the Ice Phoenix's foolproof strategy to rule the third floor. But after a full 10 seconds pass, not a single ice puppet appears anywhere near the nest. Feigning surprise, I tilt my head with an arrogant smirk, while the Ice Phoenix finally realizes that something has gone horribly, fatally wrong. You see, unlike standard summoning magic, the bone-flesh substitution technique creates ice puppets brimming with genuine life force. Because of this, controlling them demands a completely astronomical expenditure of mental energy. When controlling such vast numbers, the master can only issue the most basic of commands. The puppets are forced to rely entirely on their own combat instincts. Because of that fatal flaw, sensing when any individual puppet falls under attack becomes essentially impossible. With at least 300,000 ice puppets scattered across the valley, tracking all of them simultaneously would require a perception stat of over 3 million. Even a mythological beast like Leviathan couldn't possess a perception stat that terrifyingly high. The Ice Phoenix never even had a chance to notice me, quietly wiping them out from the shadows. In this very moment, the majestic Ice Phoenix feels as though it has plummeted into a bottomless, frozen abyss. She never could have imagined that this supposedly weak little dragon would see right through the bone. Flesh substitution's greatest, fatal weakness, or that he would actually slaughter every single one of the hundreds of thousands of ice puppets defending her valley. Your ice puppets are genuinely terrifying. You absolutely deserve your title as the absolute ruler of the third floor. But you are far too consumed by the ghosts of your past. I have walked a path much like yours. I have also stood helpless as my loved ones perished right before my eyes. Babylon told me everything about your tragic story. What happened to your precious child was an unbearable tragedy. But do you want to know the real reason I will defeat you? It is because my eyes are always locked onto the future. The ones I have lost have forged me into the monster I am today. You, however, are still chained to a grave. Babylon, at the mere mention of that forbidden name, the Ice Phoenix shudders with unprecedented violence. The absolute shock in her eyes rapidly curdles into a soul-scorching fury. That undying, meddlesome old relic. The Ice Phoenix violently beats its wings, conjuring a monstrous, world-rending gale. All the mana surging within her veins rushes fiercely into her wings. The crystalline feathers explode with a blinding, seven-color divine radiance. My expression instantly tightens. I know without a doubt, this next strike will unleash the Ice Phoenix's absolute maximum. As the magnificent radiance of its wings blazes to its absolute peak, the Ice Phoenix slams her wings down with world-shattering force, unleashing a catastrophic torrent of mana, completely beyond human imagination. Everywhere that blinding light reaches, even the very air itself freezes solid. And I, already fully restored to my peak by my rapid regeneration skill, prepared to unleash the single most devastating strike of my entire life. Comet Strike, Void Sky Pierce. It is like launching a literal star straight from my jaws. The unimaginable, godlike heat threatens to melt a world that was destined to be frozen solid forever. On one side, the very fabric of space is freezing over in absolute zero. On the other, ancient glaciers that have not melted in 10,000 years are instantly boiling away. Absolute ice and apocalyptic fire violently collide, and the resulting explosion of blinding, world-ending light is completely beyond all mortal description. Once, in the forgotten past, When this twisted dungeon was first constructed, it was a realm of pure, unadulterated chaos. In that ancient, blood-soaked era, the terrifying beasts dragged into this hell fought brutal, endless wars to violently carve up the 5 floors between themselves. But out of countless, agonizing years of that endless slaughter, a solitary phoenix was born. With nothing but her own overwhelming, peerless power, she brought all the senseless bloodshed to a grinding halt, and violently carved out a sanctuary of pure peace within the merciless walls of this 5-floor dungeon. Once, this frozen paradise echoed with the sweet melody of birdsong and bloomed with radiant warmth across every inch of the land. Even Babylon, one of the ultimate overlords, descended to this very 3rd floor to bask in its absolute tranquility. For ages, the majestic bird wielded her divine power of rebirth, willingly swallowing the crossed, rotting malice of the world, offering herself to the purgatory of flames, only to rise from the ashes entirely, reborn, purging the darkness from this sacred haven. But the wheel of fate turned, and one day, the guardian gave birth to an heir. The young fledgling proudly inherited his mother's holy duty, striving to nurture this delicate utopia within the dungeon's brutal depths. Yet, what both mother and child failed to realize was that the abyss of human greed and malice could never truly be extinguished. Leviathan, the absolute monarch of the dungeon, despised this harmony, refusing to let his monsters bask in idle luxury. In his eyes, beasts were meant to be monsters, forever chained to an endless purgatory of slaughter, forced evolution, and cold-blooded survival. With ruthless authority, the Supreme Lord invaded the 3rd floor, slaughtering the 7 innocent heir, and violently ripping the gift of sentience from every creature that called this place home, reducing them to hollow, mindless instruments of absolute carnage. To this day, the grieving mother is haunted by the dying whispers of her only son. He had murmured how beautifully perfect it would be if their golden age could span eternity, if only they possessed the power to shatter the wicked curse binding this hellscape. She had screamed at Babylon, demanding, "You stand as an overlord rivaling Leviathan himself. Why did you simply watch as that monster reduced my entire life's work to ashes?" Confronted by that agonizing sorrow, the ancient boss could only offer 3 tragic words. "I truly tried." The memory fades as I stand before the dying sovereign of ice, the blazing fury within my gaze melting away, replaced by an overwhelming wave of empathy I thought I had completely buried. Hanging on by a fragile thread of life, the majestic entity locks her piercing eyes with mine. I merely wished to restore the paradise we once knew, a sanctuary where everyone thrived in harmony, a realm absolutely free from the stench of bloodshed. Yet, your actions were infinitely more barbaric than simple murder. I absolutely refused to surrender this sanctuary to Leviathan's twisted vision. My only desire was to shield the fragile tranquility of this domain, and finally shatter the vile chains binding us to this endless torment. Tragically, you played right into the absolute monarch's blood-stained hands. You allowed yourself to transform into the exact mindless monster he always craved. The fallen deity slowly shuts her eyes, though the spark of life hasn't entirely faded. In these fleeting, agonizing seconds, she simply abandons the will to utter another sound. I silently observe her majestic, broken form, plunging into heavy contemplation, until the sovereign of the frost finally exhales her absolute last breath. I don't dare offer a hollow promise. I will break that endless curse for you. Those heroic declarations die in my throat, because they are nothing but a beautiful lie. Even if destiny allows me to slaughter Leviathan and conquer this hell, Another apex predator will inevitably claw its way to the empty throne. Forgive me. I simply do not possess that legendary, world-saving nobility. Such monumental dreams are nothing but a fool's mirage. My single unwavering ambition is to ensure the comrades standing at my side never fade away again. In the end, I let my raw, selfish truth echo through the cavern. I am unsure if it is merely a trick of the light, but the very instant my confession hits the freezing air, the shadow of eternal sorrow clinging to her lifeless features slowly begins to wash away, leaving behind the gentle warmth of absolute serenity. With a devastatingly beautiful shatter, her crystalline body collapses into a breathtaking sea of diamond dust. A glowing system screen materializes. Level up achieved. You are now level 17. Main quest successfully conquered. 80 unlock points acquired. With the fallen deities passing, the eternal glaciers groan and violently rupture. While the biting frost melts into a comforting warmth, I snap my attention to a nearby corner, my eyes locking onto the frozen cocoon imprisoning the beast girl. Her life force is flickering like a candle, but her heart still beats. I finally exhale the suffocating tension from my lungs. But the moment I step forward to shatter her icy prison, a sinister pulse of energy abruptly awakens from deep within the sea of the phoenix's shattered remains. Suddenly, a mysterious object tumbles from the shattered debris. Drawn by an unseen force, I step forward and claim it. It rests perfectly in my palm, pulsing with a jade-like warmth. The artifact reveals itself to be a flawless, egg-sized sphere of pure snow, radiating a mesmerizing and ethereal blue light. Hold on a second, could this actually be a mythical divine box? You have truly defied the heavens this time, kid. What you hold is a legendary treasure, an artifact that only drops with a minuscule one in 1,000 chance, and only upon defeating a monstrous beast above level 150.